Bill Kleyman, the man, the myth, the legend. The only other person, I shouldn't say the only other person I've been most excited about, but I got chastised by my internal team, and this person chastised me themselves. We got Buddy Reiser coming on, and when he found out that we're 200 and something episodes in, and he's not been on the podcast, he fussed at me. And when my team found out that Bill has not been on this conversation, they fussed at me. So I've been getting fussed at a lot. Thanks for coming on today. I appreciate it.
What an absolute pleasure to be here, David McCollum. Thank you for having me. I mean, clearly it took you 200 episodes to get your podcast down to a point where it was ready for Bill Kleyman.
That's 100% true.
Absolutely kidding. It is really a pleasure to get here. I think, timing is perfect. We have got a lot of really great topics and discussion points to touch on. So just a pleasure. And you know what? If anything, just hearing that soothing voice coming into that professional microphone, my gosh, I wish you could.
Whatever. You know what? I suggested to one of my colleagues, said you should get Lawson, Shanks, and Kleyman on at the same time. I said we'd put the cameras to sleep, even though they're solid state. Could you? We'd sound like disc jockeys from a smooth jazz. It'd be like KLOVE.
I can't. That's like Morgan Freeman narrating my day. I can't handle that. That's just too much awesome.
Oh, that's true. Well, hey, look, man, let's dive into it because I want to hear what you've got to say about a number of topics. But the very first thing I would love to ask, and I haven't gotten a chance to do this with you before. One, can you sort of take a moment and introduce folks to your journey to Apolo that you're CEO of now, just briefly? And then second part of that question, we thought data centers were having a moment when you were transitioning out of switch data centers where you were ridiculously good and leading innovation and thought leadership there. And now you're everywhere, even more so. But it just feels like our industry is just having moment after moment after a moment. So can you just touch on that, like just in the last few years, how our world's been changing?
Sure. Well, let's start with part one of the question.
Okay.
I'm fortunate. This geriatric millennial, which I don't know why they decided to term it that. It just could have called me an older millennial. I'm really lucky, David. And a lot of people know this about me is that I can't believe I'm not a transplant. I wanted to work in the data center industry for forever. Back in Kyiv, Ukraine, in Soviet Ukraine back in the day, my brother would compete in these telegraph competitions, right? Like the whole thing, Morse code, had this switch on there. And I was 6, 7 years old, and he'd sit me on his lap, and he'd put these big cans on me. And he taught me really simple, basic stuff. And here I am as a 6 and 7-year-old, absolutely fascinated. Now, listen, I understand it was the Soviet Union. We had phones on the wall. We weren't using Morse code to communicate across to get, our shopping done or anything. But it was just fascinating with beeps and boops that we can communicate with. That was my spark, right? Everyone's got their spark of what they want to do, and they pet their first puppy. They want to become a vet. I sent out a boop and a beep. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is what I want to do. Coming to the United States, I really kind of centered myself around like computer science classes. I had a chance at high school to work and design our athletic department's website, and oh my gosh. I'm saying this for the first time on air. I'm realizing this now, David McCall. I used Notepad. I was like an original Notepad HTMLer, and because I liked it, it was nicer, it was cleaner. Right. I could just see everything that I was working on, and that was a whole lot of fun. I went to a trade school, network engineering undergraduate, an MBA, another master's in information security. But I've always stayed in this sort of industry, sort of. Coming into Switch, that was an extraordinary experience. I joined them in 2019, reporting to Rob, and my gosh, what an extraordinary organization. To this day, some of the most amazing builders of physical ecosystems and environments that I certainly have ever seen. If anything, they look dang cool all the time.
Right.
And I had a chance to work with an amazing team that taught me quite a bit how to scale, how to create a business. And, ultimately we took this company from 4.5 billion publicly traded to selling it in December of 22, going private with DigitalBridge and IFM at the time, for $11 billion. And we did extraordinary work to make that happen. And personally for me, it was a big understanding of the importance of data centers for everything, how we communicate, how we live, play, work, live. We are at the central aspect of how we interact as human beings. And as soon as that all happened, it was January. For me, it was a high five moment that we had a mission accomplished, and it was a perfect time to part ways because it was a good exit. It was really
Right.
really fun, and I wanted to take some time off. And here it is. Here it is, everybody. Imagine you are staring at a dam, and the cracks of ChatGPT are emerging. It's January of 2023.
Right.
South Park just released an episode called Deep Learning, and it's literally at the end credits, it's written by Matt Stone and ChatGPT. And folks, you're listening to this, that episode's deep. And I'm not usually one to reference South Park
Right.
openly
Right.
as a professional. Wow. Like
Yeah.
I would say the last 40% of the episode is all ChatGPT, and it is like it's good, David, and everybody listening. So in comes this whole wave of AI, right? And I get this opportunity from one of my dearest friends, Yuri, who I've known for 22 years. He's like, Bill, I got this AI company, and I'm like, Yuri, man, I just did this. It was extraordinary. Let me take a breath. He's like, Bill, you don't understand. It's AI for the data center, and that is when, at least from my world, the ball started rolling. And this is going to sort of sum up how we're going to be discussing this. The Peter Gross says this. He's on my board. He says the data center industry loves innovation as long as it's 10 years old.
Mhm.
We don't have 10 years. What we're experiencing right now in this industry are known as microshifts, a shift in the data center space every 30 to 60 days. And I can exemplify some of these crazy traits that are happening. For example, raised floors are becoming a big thing now. We're seeing more liquid coming into the data center. We're seeing a massive shift from 10 to 15 kW per rack to 50, 60, 70 kW per rack. And we're not talking like, hey, you should be planning this 12 to 36 months from now. This is like, how do I deploy this today? So we're not just having a moment, we're having an every single second of the day kind of a situation here for the data center. And once again, we're at the center of it. And there's a reason, everybody listening, there's a reason why JLL recently came out and stated that the data center class is the hottest asset class right now in the market.
I believe that to be true. I've been stuck on something you said though,
Shoot.
which was HTML, and you're in the athletic department. Like I could, all that's fantastic information, but I'm imagining young Bill Kleyman going up to the athletic director and saying, "Look, I'm going to build your website. I'm going to do these things. And if any of these athletes start to give me a hard time, I'm either going to change their grade for the negative or to the positive if they mess with me." And you'd be like the super most powerful. Be like that little girl with the death ray in the book in Men in Black with all the protective aliens, making sure nobody messes with them
But
because,
she's the threat now.
oh yeah, she's the
Cards on
power
the table.
for sure.
2 year cross country, 2 year water polo, 4 year lettered swimmer. So I
Yeah,
I had a chance to hang out
sure,
in the athletic department,
sure,
but I
sure.
spent my time in the pool or behind
Yeah.
the computer.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I love that. And then the South Park reference was kind of a vulgar display of power, if I'm honest. I really like that. But the generation before you had a very similar experience, but instead of ChatGPT, it was their depiction of World of Warcraft.
Oh wow.
And good 20-year ago depiction, something like that. And it was a fantastic episode. Painted, not that I have firsthand experience. I want to pretend this is anecdotal information, but it was, the sword of destiny or whatever they were chasing. And
That's
so
right.
we're, we're working it. We're working it all in. I mean, somebody tweeted that or texted that to me just a minute ago. I don't have that locked up here. So let's come back to data centers. So yeah, when you were mentioning, January 23, a few people close started hearing it. I want to say that wintertime, but most of it's sort of like those who knew what to pay attention for, like you. You heard the tremor, you heard
Yeah.
like boom, boom, boom. You hear the deep bass, the ripple in the wave. Nobody else on the beach had any idea there was something in the water, or that T-Rex had broke from its pen. Like nobody knew except for a few seismologists who were looking at a graph saying, "Huh, something seems unusual here." And then people start looking up and seeing the cracks and hearing the noise and whatever. And so as you recall that in 2023 to now, really, there's a lot that's been thrust onto data centers. Like
Sure.
I'm reluctant to say the new era. To your point about microshifts, it just feels like every 30 to 60 days, maybe 90 days at the most. 90 days almost seems too long. That there is in whatever, maybe that's the new era. That these seismic, a twitch or a major movement on the seismic board, like there's something here. And you've said to me in the past, look, there's two things you got to have: power and bravery.
Right.
So, what do you mean by that?
I I genuinely do believe that in the age of AI that you do need two things to be successful. You need power, the availability to, obviously electricity and so on. But also bravery. You need to be brave in this era. Um, let's if we can, David, I want to put a small pin in that because
Sure.
we're talking about the technological shift, and we've talked about the technological shift, between you and I many times at many
Hmm.
conferences. I make sure that I find you and I sit next to you, and outside of a selfie, we actually get a chance to sit down and spend some time in chat.
Yeah.
Everybody listening, I want you to stop thinking about technology for a second, and please think about you, your life, your kids, you who you are, as a human being for just a second. And we're going to go on a little journey today. Not long, I promise, but definitely stay with me. So if you're on your Amazon shopping list, hop on this wonderful conversation David and I are having. Um, so in 1995, Alta Vista came out. In 1996, Ask a Jeeves came out, and in 1998, September was the first time that we could ask Google a question. And ever since then, we'll just use Google as the baseline. Ever since then, you, David, me, all of the wonderful listeners that are hearing this, you and I have been conditioned to interact with data in a very specific manner. You ask it a question and you get a blue link. That's it. That's how we've been conditioned. Before that, there was nothing. There was
Hmm.
really maybe some search engines here and there, ways to find information, but that's how we've been trained effectively, right? And this has been going on now with like internal searches, like if you have like a SharePoint, for example, even like emails, like it's you asking a question and you getting. Now I'm not using this word derogatory in a derogatory manner. Benign links. You pick the link that fits best to you. Here they are. Here are the ones that I think are the best. So almost what feels like overnight, because the first generative pre-trained transformer GPT came out about 2017, 2018. And that was GPT-1, a little bit after that, GPT-2. Now, as far as intelligence is concerned, it's basically like asking a 1.5-year-old a question and expecting a paragraph sentence back. It's just not going to happen. You might get a word or two that makes sense, but
Right.
mostly it won't. It wasn't until GPT-3, 3.5, and now 4 Omni, and even more so right now, and I cannot stress this enough, Llama 3.1 405B, when those came out, everything changed. Because for the first time in our existence, we could ask data a question and get a conscious answer back. Now, I'm not talking Skynet, please don't freak
Hmm.
out. I'm talking like an actual, wholly original generated answer to your question, not a blue link. And we start talking about shifts and microshifts. If you go on Google or Bing right now and you ask it a question, the first response you get is no longer a blue link. It's a generative AI response. So, all of you, every single person listening to this, if you used Google in the past 30 minutes, hour, day,
Right.
you are a user of generative AI. There is no other technology in our existence that has had such a wide adoption, such as this. Please just put that in the back of your mind, because
Mm.
we're not experiencing a technology shift. The
Mm.
way we interact with data has fundamentally changed. So it is as much of a technology shift as it is a humanity shift. This is not a fad. This is a fad. This fidget spinner that's on my desk that keeps me entertained, that's a fad. This is as much of a fad as when we stopped riding horses, started driving cars, stopped taking trains, and started flying airplanes. Now, I am 100% confident that that is the case, and that this is a long game. We're only starting out. Now, back to your earlier point, what does it take to be successful for a data center in this industry? Power and bravery. Well, obviously you need access to power, right? That's one of the most important things here. But what does ultimately bravery look like? Bravery, at least in my experience, look at my partner, Scott Data Center in Omaha, Nebraska. 100 and some odd thousand square foot facility, about 115 enterprise clients, right, with a full managed services offering. They went to their customers and they learned about a new market, an enterprise user base that doesn't want to go to the cloud, that wants to keep their stuff in your data centers, in your facilities, that wants that locality and privacy and wants to maintain that relationship. But when they go to the data center and they ask for that, the data center says, not that I don't want to. How? I work at 10 to 15 kW per rack. And now you want me to put a rack in that's 50, 60, 70 kilowatts? How do I manage this? Even if I put the GPUs in here, how do I wrap my managed services around? How do I actually create a service architecture out of this? So bravery, in my opinion, looks like understanding that there's going to be some capital investments. There's going to be places where you might need to look at putting liquid cooling in your facilities. Guys, girls, everybody listening, we have reached the sort of the stopping point of physics. How much air can effectively dissipate heat from mechanical equipment? Now, air is not going anywhere, right? If you went on LinkedIn recently and you saw one of my videos, it was an exclusive video from inside of the brand new Cortex AI data center in Austin, Texas from Tesla. You'll see that there's raised floors, there's airflow happening, there's liquid cooling going into those really pretty super micro racks, a combination of those technologies. But bravery looks like a really good holistic view of your business. How do I potentially put a car radiator in the back of a rack, a rear door heat exchanger potentially, right? Or direct to chip liquid cooling? How do I potentially either purchase GPUs or become participative, actually participate in this market and not just see it pass by? Bravery means asking some questions which will make you uncomfortable, which I absolutely believe in this era of microshifts for the data center, you need to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's very, very difficult for this industry to shift as quickly as these end users are asking us to do so. So bravery is a multifaceted, sort of ethereal question, right? And it's contextual, deeply contextual to each and every single one of you people listening to this, because it could be looking at new styles of architecture, looking at potentially putting in direct-to-chip liquid cooling or rear door heat exchangers, potentially looking at new ways of powering your facilities, a 3 gigawatt hydrogen facility coming up in West Texas, a 100 megawatt renewable natural gas facility coming up in Eastern Arkansas, for example, power islands, microgrids. We are pushing ourselves so that we can support not a technology shift, but a shift in humanity. And that's exciting. And that's what bravery looks like, is sitting down and managing that downside risk. That's actually a quote from Walter Scott Jr. He founded the Walter Scott Jr. Foundation. And he talks about understanding those risks that go deeper. And one of those is staying complacent. No, it's okay. This stuff isn't for me. It's going to pass us by. It's not. Every data center will become an AI data center. Everyone, it just depends on how quickly you can get there.
That's a lot, and I love it. Let me ask you this. As you were describing this idea of bravery, which I agree with, I didn't realize how violently I agreed with it, but I want to pose an idea to you and see if you can track with me. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard the term pioneer stock in terms of human beings, like citizens in the U.S.? They will use this term called pioneer stock. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Here's what it means. Before World War II in America, we had most of the citizenry, regardless of their color, their age, their ethnicity, whatever, very few of them were more than a few generations from here. They were pioneers. They were from somewhere else. Or if they had been here for some period of time, they had ventured out, many of them, from the comfortable areas of New England and the East Coast into the Midwest and even further. And so they had this very entrepreneurial sort of makeup in their DNA. They'd come from other parts of the world. Many of them just barely spoke English. Didn't matter. I'm venturing out. And they took on the world. And then towards the end of this time, just before World War II, you had the Great Depression. And it was tough. I remember my grandfather telling me, he was a Scots-Irish kid from Ohio. He was adopted by two Marines who both my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather were Marines in the 20s. It was a tough era. And he said, Dave, we always had, David, we always had one meal. Sometimes we had two meals. We rarely had three meals. This is a man who had his tonsils removed without anesthesia. There was no, you grandma or the neighbor up the street sort of knew some medicine and they did it. Like, this is tough, hardy people. And those people around the world are who fought the great wars, did the great manufacturing, established command and control across sea lanes so we could optimize international trade. All of these things, like tough, hardy people. I remember when I joined data centers, coming out of IT specifically and came into the data center world in the early 2000s, I came into, well, we call it data center, it's called co-location at that time. So you had two sort of broad groups, at least the way that I describe it. You had those that were co-location centric. So yes, you had a data center facility, and yes, we had data center people, but our expertise was in all of the IT and telecom infrastructure. We had to, in those early days, as you remember, learn how to balance compute, network, and storage within the systems. You couldn't have all of your backups running on a Sunday evening because you brought the whole place down. You couldn't have systems fail in a certain way where a computer might bounce right back, a storage array couldn't, NAS or SAN or your JBot, or whatever. All of these different things. We had telecom gurus because they had come out of the telecom industry, but where that was applicable wasn't just in routes, it was how you did conduit, how you routed fiber, how you managed it within, how you did these paths. And from there, if you remember, when cloud really began gaining momentum, many of us co-location that came out of this heavily SLA, service-oriented, whatever. And we're used to being in those trenches, patching people's systems, doing their DR. You have that. And then you had the real estate data center people that were doing real estate sort of big, what later, it was sort of the ancestor to what we'd call hyperscale later. But anyway, these were the big paths. And I remember even here at QTS, me and my co-SE, I was like, man, I want to pursue the big enterprise wholesale stuff. I've been doing cloud or certainly virtualization for many number of years. It's not something I want to keep doing. I want to investigate this. And he wanted to do the opposite. So what does all of this have to say? There was a lot of courage. We built our private clouds. We built managed hosting. We built big VMware infrastructure when many data centers were just doing, and I don't mean that with disrespect, they were just space and power, ping, power, pipe. That was what they did. And organizations like ours did this co-location stuff, and the world thought we were crazy. And we rode that for a while. And then in 2018, we just said, look, this is now the value for us to be in private cloud, because public cloud, you could do production. Not only could you do production, it wasn't just test dev, you could do secure federal environments. You could do all of this stuff with FedRAMP and FISMA and all these other things. And for us to chase an AWS or do this, a niche of a niche just didn't make sense. So when you talk about bravery, it feels like there's this, when I talk about also combine that with Pioneer stock, there are those of us that have kind of come out of this very hardy, entrepreneurial, whatever, even though we may look like a real estate company. And there are those whose DNA is just in the real estate world, and no disrespect to them, but they just didn't come out of that. And so I think it'd be interesting to react or see the market react to your comment about bravery. How many of this pioneer stock, this service IT stock that's used to attempting things, heck, in our early days, where we bought a brownfield, what we converted, how we did it, came out of sort of this entrepreneurial DNA, and it'll be interesting to see how the market responds going forward. Do we kind of pick up that, that legacy of risk taking? Sure. Or do we just, no, we're going to keep it safer? And I chuckle at myself when I say keep it safer, building a 2,000 megawatt campus. I don't know how safe that is. But certainly we are in an inflection, and I'll be curious to see how the market responds to these opportunities.
So I think we're a few minutes into this conversation, and I haven't actually told you what we do at Apollo, and it's very relevant to this statement. And it's not, this is not going to be a commercial. It's just it's super relevant to to your statement around this bravery and how the evolution of this data center is emerging right before our eyes. So in my opinion, there's and at least what we've seen, there's three major types of players in this AI market right now. Big
Okay.
ones. Three different types. There are the data center players who can build for others. So, for example, those data center operators building for Google, the Microsofts, the Google, Microsofts, the Amazons of the world, et cetera, right?
Hmm.
And in those situations, we found that these players, while they can support the market, they can never participate in it,
Hmm.
which means like they can't deploy their own service, like we talked about, to actually start to manage and own the AI process, right? Because if they do, they're going to compete with their number one customers. Now, that's not saying that anything's bad. There's clearly the data center industry is booming. Hyperscalers are buying, and there's the primary, let's call them NFL cities markets, are extremely power constrained. So that business isn't going anywhere. The second type of operator that we see in this market, and this is, please people, everyone's going to listen, this is not derogatory. We obviously see value in these types of players, but we consider them to be very, 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 very fancy laundromats, right? You put in 25 cents, you get an H100 for a couple hours, or not even, like maybe 30 minutes or something. But you get an
Describe
H100.
what that is to people who may not know.
So that's like, I would say like a Core Weave, like a Nebius, like
No, but you said
Manta Labs.
H100. You mean a GPU. They're
Yeah,
renting out an instance of hardware performance, right?
exactly. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
basically just GPU, just to train a model to do something like that, build your own little LLM, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Um, and we're what we see at Apollo is that's really a dangerous race to the bottom, right? CoreWeave is the closest to what is a normalized operating price for an H100 per hour, which is about $4.25, which is what they have listed. So anytime you see something in like the buck 99, buck 75, that's a lot of subsidized pricing, right? And that's just not where we're trying to play at Apollo, because that's a race to how low can we get it, and it's a competition based on price alone. The third type of player in this market is the one that owns the keys to the kingdom. So think like the Amazon services layer, the Google services layer, the Microsoft services layer, right? And you'll see them also selling GPUs very low cost, but that's because they own the entire infrastructure. And when you get in there, you're actually leveraging other services like storage, network compute, GPU, CPU, and et cetera, and other ML services as well, PyTorch, Tensor, et cetera, right? Well, to be perfectly blunt, that's what Apollo has. Apollo, and this is after doing much research. I don't know how this is weird, but we're the industry's only multi-tenant MLOps AI platform layer, which means that a data center that wants to enter into this services game, that doesn't want to just compete on price, for example, who wants to actually create a full service, would deploy Apollo. We integrate with network, storage, compute, GPU, CPU, where others were built for the enterprise to support the enterprise. Apollo was natively built for the data center and the telco to support their enterprise. So literally the first one out there that says, here's a full-blown cloud service architecture. You can come in here and start consuming this. So when we start to take a look at what that actually looks like, we see, like I said earlier, a market base, customers, consumers that are, how do I say this, price conscious, but not price sensitive, which means that they'll pay an extra 10, 15% as long as they can keep their data within your facility, but also have this platform layer that's entirely theirs and is allowed to keep things private within their ecosystem. So we've started to see that there's a need for a lot of these customers, these clients, to find avenues of compute within their infrastructure where right now they're literally relegated to go to the cloud when sometimes they don't necessarily want to. So back to your earlier point, we're at a position right now in this market where we know that these customers want to consume these services. And Bravery, like I said earlier, looks at, how do I capture this market?
Mm-hmm.
How do I prevent revenue bleed? How do I make sure that I have these managed services contracts within my ecosystem? Because what Apollo is not doing, I'm not going after the model builders. Go rent a GPU for a couple bucks an hour. I am looking at the long game artificial intelligence. And everybody listening, this is probably one of the most important statements that you're going to hear. We are slowly well, not slowly. We are quickly, I should say, entering the digestion period of artificial intelligence. Okay, we've bought all these GPUs, we've gotten all of this stuff ready to go. Now the investors are like, cool, cool, cool. Make them work. Stop buying more GPUs. Like, let's see this investment actually happen. Right. That's the digestion period. We believe in inference. We believe in actually using existing models to give to organizations to actually start the real utilization of these AI systems. So actual use cases behind them. That's where we see a lot of the power happening. Inference at the edge, potentially, inference at all of these co-location providers with these enterprises. They're not trying to build models, they're trying to build RAG, sales agents, searching capabilities and functions, that low-hanging fruit, which we can talk about because we get the question, Bill, how do you fill these servers up? How do you actually fill workloads up with enterprise customers? And I'll happily share that with you because we found success, like I said, with our partner at Scott. But in those situations, and everybody listening, it's about approaching this customer in this perspective from a new angle, a new viewpoint, understanding that they're trying to consume these systems. And right now, a lot of where this money is actually going to be coming from is going to be the enterprises using existing models like Llama 3.1, 405B in a completely private setting to actually build out use cases. The digestion period of AI. I would consider ourselves like the Pepto-Bismol if you have a little tummy ache. That's what Apollo is doing. So right. We have an extraordinary purview as a foundational technology because we're not just for one industry or one vertical. We're for everybody because we see what's being developed. We have banks running on Apollo right now, a publicly traded marketing organization for Y Combinator startups that are funded, at least 2 enterprises, and they're not paying $2 an hour or right. $3 an hour. They're paying substantially more because it is that full network, storage, compute. The reason why Amazon and Microsoft and Google are successful because they own that software layer. What we have, the difference is that we can white label it and put it into a traditional data center that already has these customers that don't ultimately want to go to the cloud. But we can't do that in a rack that supports 10 kW or 5 or 8. We need a data center who's brave, who's going to put in higher density racks, who's going to invest capital. That's the other thing, who's actually going to invest capital to buy some of this to actually own the entire process. And we're gonna do some show and tell here, David McCall. We're gonna do some show and tell. This is one of our racks. Probably can see it. There you go. Yeah. It is a taller rack, 50+U rack. This is a Motivair rear door heat exchanger. Actually, just over here is a Vertiv rear door heat exchanger as well, handling other pieces of the infrastructure. There are 6 DGX units in this thing, each one taking about 10.2 kilowatts per rack, and each DGX unit has about 8 cards in it. It has 8 cards in it. And what's really amazing is Apollo runs on top, and it can do self-service, reserved instances, reserve the entire node, reserve a couple of cards. For Scott, they sit back and they watch it be consumed because they have the services layer. Now, that is an extraordinary use case. You saw that rack. This is a traditional co-location facility that said, holy cow, I have 100 Fortune-sized enterprise customers, and they want to stay with me. I'm going to build the service. I'm going to own it all, start to finish, the pricing, the modeling, the network storage and compute, the ingress and egress. I'm literally gonna own the whole thing, and I'm still gonna charge great prices and less expensive than in other situations. And I'm not gonna get the model builders. I'm gonna get colo clients to stay there for a long time. Now, as far as economics are concerned, and this is the other question that I get, I want to give people as much information as I can. This rack to put together, $2 to $3 million. It's not cheap. It's not cheap for one, right? It's about $2 to $3 million. The ARR, the annual revenue for one rack, is $2 to $5 million.
Wow.
So you have to think about those numbers and those metrics and understand that as long as you have an avenue to the customers and filling up those workloads, which we're developing, and it's not the easiest because there's a lot of education, right? And we can talk about how this AI game came from, oh my God, artificial intelligence is going to change the world. It's going to cure cancer. It's the best thing in the world, to understanding very quickly that large language models dream and ChatGPT hallucinates. Right. So it's not the answer for everything, but there are low-hanging fruit around generative AI where right now it is one of the most powerful tools you could imagine for massive organizations that can create an ROI, not in a year or two, but just in a few months. That's the kind of stuff that we're plucking and showing different organizations. And I'd be happy if we have time at the end to give you literally just talk through a real use case with some customers of where this stuff doesn't hallucinate. It's very accurate and there's actual use cases behind it. Very long-winded. I know that was long-winded. That's what bravery ultimately looks like, is a traditional co-location says there's a market for this and it's massively lucrative. And not just that, there's an element of democratizing these technologies so that the customer doesn't ultimately have to go to the cloud. How do I bring that service to my clients?
Let me ask you this. So I have a lot of friends in the data center business, and not all data centers have the same. I would say all serious data centers have a foundational principle, which is we have to be always on, we have to be always available, and we have to be always secure. Like I don't know what you are if you aren't those three things, but I personally wouldn't call you a data center. So you've got to be on when I need my electrons or my IOPS or whatever to move. I need to be able to connect to them, and I need it to be physically and logically at least up to whatever the demising point is when it's your infrastructure versus mine. And then from there, they can play different roles. They could be an edge data center, which I hope we get to before this is all done. It could be a large campus. It could be in any of the, a very specific role data center. It could be a multi-tenant, a broader role, and there are size and scale. So when you describe something like this, I can see a number of data centers. I don't want to put an artificial size on them, but I can imagine people that I know very interested in this. I don't just want to say the Midwest, but they're a certain size of a data center that has traditionally been looking for these higher white glove touch services. Some data centers have worked more of those out as they've focused on whatever their very specific application is, whether that's size or geographic location or whatever. And others, I would say, sort of in the middle, just as my personal experience, that are always looking for that higher touch, more services, stickier, because I want to give somebody an opportunity to get managed hosting from me instead of having to go to the cloud, either for data sovereignty reasons or whatever. Or I want them, instead of hiring a third-party IT firm that has to come into my data center, hire us, and I'll be your remote hands and eyes. Or instead of doing your firewall management, hire us because I've got these experts. Not all do that. Some of us have moved out of that space. It was part of our story, but there are other things. But so my curiosity is, I'm sure Apolo could articulate a story for everybody to consider this. But who do you think today, in the AI era that we're in, with a looming AI bubble I've heard people discuss, with all of the things that are going on, and many of us are just trying to move at the pace of the market right now, what are the folks that you're getting the most traction with that say, well, hold on, Bill, tell me more. I want to know more. Not the details of the, not this broad brush that you just gave us, but the, come and sit down because I'm always looking to add more services. Where is that? A size? Is it a geographic location? Is it who would that be?
It's funny you mentioned that. I just sent out an email to a friend of mine over at DC Byte.
And by the way, we haven't arranged any of this. This is just us reacting to each other.
Yeah. That's absolutely the case. Absolutely the case. I sent a note to my friend Colby Cox
Colby, I know Colby.
at DC Byte.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool. This is the question that I asked him as well, right? And there's a few players out there. So small, mid-tier facility, doesn't have to be massive, right? Secondary, tertiary market, even in the primary as well. This third one can be misconstrued a little bit, and I'm going to say it on the air because why not? Is not necessarily backed by a massive private equity.
Okay.
And that's not a bad thing, but their goal is much, much, much bigger than I think what I'm trying to create.
Right.
Has a full managed services offering, not just an Ethernet into a firewall, and that's it. right?
Right.
You
Right.
need to have some that, and that's been the big one. Please understand, it's probably one of my top ones. Any data center who has a managed services offering with that intimate touch into the customer,
Hmm.
that is exceedingly successful for us. Um, you don't need a lot. You can have a handful of locations. Even just one is fine. Scott Data
Hmm.
Centers in Omaha, Nebraska, and all or at least almost all of your tenants and customers are enterprise customers and end users, right?
Right.
And so in those situations, what we do, and this is how we did it with Scott Data Center. We went on a CIO, CTO, CEO survey, right?
Hmm.
And Scott Data Center, Ken Moriano went and asked his internal customers, if I put this gear in, this physical infrastructure, I own it, but you can use it. And I put the software layer, Apollo, on it. Will you come to me? And he just kept getting resounding yeses from banks, from pharma, from institutionals, educational, and so on. And so he's like, okay, oh, it's not that I'm going to build it, they will come. They're at my door asking
Right.
for this stuff because otherwise they're just going to go to the cloud, right? So
Right.
I want to keep this business here. How do I do that? The optimal types of facilities for us to work with right now are ones that, have power available, right? Have maybe some infrastructure already, have some liquid. There's low hanging fruit. Now, that being said, we've had several cryptocurrency reach out to us, and believe me, they got a lot of power and a whole ton of bravery in the form of a checkbook. Now, they are fascinating. They have all the infrastructure, even sometimes the GPU systems. You know what they don't have, Dave McCall? They don't have generators. They don't have a
Mm.
lot of UPS systems. So do you know what they're realizing? They're not going to wait 52 plus weeks for a 2.5 megawatt Cat 5 generator or Caterpillar generator. They're going to build tier zero AI farms. I'm not kidding, right? And they're going to
Right.
write it in the SLA. And because my platform is both hardware and disaggregated, it's complete distributed ecosystem, a client can select a cluster, run it at a crypto, knowing that, hey, if it fails, I've been taking snapshots every 30 minutes. Or if you need to run a job that can't fail, put it in the Scott data center that's a tier 3 facility. But I don't want to digress away from your question. The ideal candidates are ones that have those facilities that are saying, okay, Bill, I'm willing to put in not hundreds of millions of dollars, but a little bit of capital to actually start this, and then working with us potentially to actually fill those workloads up, which we've been doing quite successfully. Again, picking that low hanging generative AI fruit and getting organizations to jump on our infrastructure and start doing inferencing, start actually developing some of these use cases out. So that would be an ideal kind of client. Candidly speaking, have we had some of those traditional data centers that are building for hyperscalers come to us and start asking us questions? We have, and I've been a little
Mm.
bit surprised by that. And I think a part of it is because they are trying, back to quoting Walter Scott Jr., to manage their downside risk. And I'm going to maybe say something a little bit controversial here, David, and everybody. And you're welcome to argue with me on LinkedIn or whatever it is, but the challenge that I see in this industry is, let's say that there's a young upstart AI company that gets $350 million in capital, right? And their investors say, go out there and capture a part of this market. So they go to a big data center provider, they take down 15 megawatts, and they put all this AI gear that they've purchased. Now they're still really cash rich. Now they're charging their customers $1.50 for an H100, but that is not what they're being charged per hour to manage those H100s, the price per kilowatt, right? Now, the argument there is, well, the data center doesn't really care, right? They're showing returns for the rack. They can amortize it. They can depreciate the asset if they need to over the course of 6 to 7 years. If that's the traditional way of thinking, everybody, that's not how fast AI is moving. If you take a look at what NVIDIA said, now I know they had a little chip slip, but they're talking about a new chip every single year. Okay. So in some situations, what happens is when those subsidies run out, and that might happen as quickly as 12 to 24 months, those AI companies that are taking up those big spaces now go from $1.50 to charging $5 or $6 an hour, maybe $4 or $5 an hour. And all of a sudden, they're at risk of losing their business because the only thing they had to compete on was price.
Mm.
So now the big question here for those that don't want to take the let's call it the bravery approach that I've been sort of pontificating here, and they want to play the safer route, is how do you manage that downside risk? Because in the past, if a company goes under and you have to replace a couple 100 kW, it's a pain in the butt. But if now an AI company goes down and you have to replace 1, 5, 10 megawatts, That's not that easy any longer. And the challenge is because you don't own that process. You don't own the keys to the kingdom through the software. So that the traction that we've been having the most, and I think we've talked about the risk here as well. The traction that we've seen the most is in those facilities whose customers, their tenants are enterprises where there's an existing managed service. With Scott Data Center, that is exactly what we did. Everybody listening, please understand that's exactly what we did. They put in the physical infrastructure, network, storage, compute. We work with our wonderful partners at WWT to facilitate some of this. They use vast storage, which is absolutely amazing for artificial intelligence and machine learning types of workloads. They put that in. They said, Bill, we're ready to go. We integrated with backend billing, CRM, ERP systems, everything, ticketing systems, their managed services environment. So now they have a full-blown cloud service, which if at the best thing I can correlate it to is what you get to Amazon. When you go there and you consume a GPU or a CPU or a little bit of storage, that's what these data centers can now facilitate. And they own the entire process. So they're managing the downside risk by operating at normalized prices today, not somewhere in the near future. That's where we've had the most traction. I know that was very long-winded. I think if my step 1, 2, 3 recommendation, step 1, realize that you have the customer base for this. Number 2, realize, okay, I think I've got the appetite for this. And number 3, start asking the questions. Start actually saying, okay, how do I do this? How do I build a new facility? How do I potentially put a row of GPUs in here so I can actually start offering this service? Please understand, this is not a build it, they will come. These customers, these enterprises, especially the ones that are starting to understand inference using these models, they want that services type of layer. They don't necessarily want to go to CoreWeave. They're not building models, right? They want to have their information. They want to do AI where the data lives.
Well, we're going to certainly link so that people that hear this that want to connect with you can do that.
Please.
What I'm curious about, though, when you describe this is there are a lot, I can imagine a whole lot of people out there saying, I'm curious, but to your point about bravery, look, capital's not cheap these days. We have seen in the colo world 20 years ago, 15 years ago, an attraction to getting into managing hardware, including private clouds and private DR infrastructure. And many of those have moved off of that system. They've just ceded the battle to the big public clouds. Not everybody. There's plenty that are out there that I talk to on occasion that, man, they're owning that sweet spot. Their customers want the higher attention to detail. They're getting they recognize the benefit and the, I don't want to say pros and cons. That's a wrong way to say it. These are the limitations of a smaller organization, but this is the boutique experience that you get. And so long as it fits within your risk, financial, and service profile, everybody would want that level of service. Anyway, so they've built a business for themselves doing that. But there are other folks that have said, look, whether it was our commitment to it or the timing or whatever, we had to get out of that business. So if people are curious, what is the how would they engage? And I know we keep saying it's not an infomercial for Apolo, but I'm just curious. I'm curious.
Look, my goal is to democratize.
No, I know. But I know you. Here's one of the challenges, though, and I love this from ancient writings. The symbol for chaos, or for the ocean, is the chaos symbol, because we wouldn't sail away from land. We didn't have really keels in the bottom of boats. The great mythological monsters and stories, some came from caves, some came from the clouds, but almost all of them were related to the ocean or deep water. And as we teach our children how to swim, it's very intimidating. We forget how intimidating it was. We have to wade into the water and show them, look, it's okay. And we teach them how to swim. We do that both to protect them, because water's everywhere and we want them to be protected around it, but we want to give them freedom. We want to give them power. We want to give them some control over their environment. And so I can imagine people, as you're describing this, are saying, look, I'm curious, I'm interested, but it's intimidating for me.
Yeah.
There's things are moving so far. We started off our conversation earlier today with this era of AI. We've thrown terminology out there with each other about AI bubbles and hardware infrastructure. And there's a lot going on. You know, you started your analogy, your picture in the beginning was cracks in the dam as
Yeah.
we saw the tremors. And so there are a number of organizations, I'm sure, that would say, man, if I could increase my revenue model, if I could get stickier with my customers, if I could provide a service that my customers really prefer to use, or at least have it as an option instead of the options that exist out there. I would like another option. How do you have a conversation with them to at least get them to come to the baby pool and check it out? Maybe not, they don't go any further, but to just check it out and engage with the idea that you want them to consider.
The first step I would say is understanding what we're managing, what we're trying to put in your facility, right? Managing an email server and trying to create a revenue model off an even email service is much different than managing a NVIDIA DGX or a Supermicro HGX. These are the servers that have the cards inside of them for artificial intelligence. The revenue models are different. The customers are the same, but their use cases are going to be fundamentally different. The easiest way to get started is just to ask questions. And I'm pretty easy to find. But stay with me for a second here. Stay with me for a second. You're on this journey. You're always going to be on this journey. Every single person is going to be on this journey. And all of us have a decision to make, to move forward or to stay in the seats that we're in and be comfortable. Mm-hmm. But imagine with me for a second, okay? There's a cave. There's a cave in front of you. And you know that you should go into this cave. Because if you do, and it's dark and it's scary, you're going to learn more about yourself and about your business. But to go back means that everything's safe and it's all still the same, but it's brighter out there. But if you go into this cave, you know that you will become better and bigger and braver and learn more about not just yourself, but also the environment around you. That's a part of this journey that we're going on right now. And the cave is not an end all. There's a light at the end of it. Your job is through that journey, find what color that light is, where that light is. It's a little bit sooner, it's a little bit further, but you will never be stuck in that cave because there's always going to be people that guide you. Me, the beautiful voice of David McCall, the absolutely soothing voice of Phil Lawson Shanks will always be there to call you. So if you're ever really afraid, you just close your eyes and you ask for help. Right. Much like David, what you're doing right now, saying, how do you get started? Some of these people have already walked into the cave and it's damn scary. And they're like, I'm calling out for help because I don't know which way to go. And that's where our voice is, where we start to guide you. Now, I know that's maybe cheesy and super ethereal. And I usually like to talk about, but AI is so cool. It'll change the world. I understand the psychological implications of doing something that is so nascent, so new, novel, and scary. But I want everyone listening to just think about something for a second. This AI conversation that we're having is not over in next year. We are just getting started. Recently, OpenAI released an image. It's called Imagine Our AI Future. And they released the 5 levels of artificial intelligence, specifically with generative AI. And I'm going to read them off to you really quick, okay? Level 1, chatbots. Level 2, reasoners. Level 3, agents. Level 4, innovators. And level 5, organizations, where at level 5, AI that can do the work of an entire organization. Now, if you're curious where we are in this cycle, level 1, barely scratching the surface of it, right? Realizing that large language models, as powerful as they are still not at a point where they can do human level problem solving without, going bananas. And so remarkably, even right now, already, despite the fact that 95% of the world's information was created in the last year and a half, and that number keeps shrinking, we are already running out of data to train our models and are turning to synthetic data to try and create outcomes. That is how wild this is. And we're still creating that information to feed future large language models. This game, this shift in humanity is for a long time. This is a very long answer. I know we're going on a little bit of a hike here, but to get started, to understand this, know that this market and this business is different, understand how much of it you want to own. And I've had these conversations with C-level individuals of very large data centers, and they're like, Bill, we've got a great formula, and that formula is to build more data centers for other people. And I think you should stick with that. If this is something that works for you and it's such a major deviation from your business, maybe don't do it. But if you are a data center organization and you potentially are still building, but you have that managed services side of your business, and you've got a lot of really great enterprise customers, you should start asking your question, how do I build this here? Now, what Apollo has done is we are that voice. We are shining a flashlight through the cave saying, just come this way. We are literally the software piece that ties all of these other components together for you to create this service. The challenge for you is you have to try it, right? And what we're fortunate now is we have partners that I can do a demo for you. I can show you what these environments look like. I could even maybe white label a DGX for you, put your logo on there, and go ahead and play around with it for a little bit. That's taken us over a year to develop that market, but we're still doing it. I there's no other way I can say it other than just find me. If not me, find David or somebody else and start asking the questions of how do I bring these services to my customers and how do I get started?
Yeah, I think it's important to evaluate this marketplace. I don't know. That's a perfect analogy. When you started doing the cave, this is not flattering, but it made me laugh. Do you remember that cartoon, The Far Side?
Yes.
There is a Gary Larson, one of my favorite Far Sides of all time, was this Papa Bear with two little cubs sitting on his knee. And the cub said, Papa, tell us this story one more time. And they're both wearing these like hunter hats. And he said, all right, but then it's time for bed. And he holds up one hat and he says, say, Bob, you suppose there's any bears in this cave? I don't know, Bill. Let's go and check it out. And I'd laugh every time I think of that. Hopefully in the cave that you're with the flashlight, there are no bears in there. But this is where I was trying to describe to somebody the other day. We went to this thing that I believe, or at least the first time I experienced, but I believe they're from Texas. And it's an experience, is the only way I can describe it, called Buc-ee's. And so you're driving down the freeway and you pull into this place and it catches your attention. First of all, you see a beaver hat, like 60 billboards for, the 100 miles leading up to it. And when you pull in, I don't even know how many pumps they have, hundreds of pumps. They pay their people much, double, 60%, 110% more than an equivalent role at the regional, retail shopping center. I mean, their bathrooms are immaculate. And I own no Buc-ee's stock. I'm just saying that this place is monster. It's easy to get service. When you go in there, they've got fresh brisket going. They've got it's an experience. There's no other way to describe it. It's an experience. And it feels to me like so many people, I know lots of people in the business of gas stations, service stations, that in the early days of service stations, they were very high touch. You had somebody come out and wipe off your windshield. I can remember that era, and check your blades and fill your gas and all these other things. Very affordable. And then that went away as market pressure came in. That all went away. It was just a gas station. And eventually they began building these convenience stores that were part of them. You still had to go in and do these other things. The gas stations are gone. If you want to stay in the gas station business, unless you're doing something massive, or doing it on a wholesale level, you're not going to have, or you're the only one. You're the only one in that county or on the mountaintop. But for most people, that's not it. So if you're a service-oriented organization, even if the market changes around you, the services that you needed before or that you provided before aren't needed now. I think what you're articulating is, look, there are services. This new era of services may not look like that, or at the very least, it's supplementing that. And your customers will come. If you hang the shingle out here, if you do that, I promise you, they're going to want to, we've got the Coca-Cola Museum here. And many people would say, oh, you mean like a vending machine? No. You go to the Coca-Cola Museum and they've got a machine where you interact with it very simply, and you can, through choosing 3 or 4 buttons, any flavor, any combination of flavors, any calorie, any whatever, and it makes your cocktail for you right there with the little pebble ice. Like it's the complexity and the sophistication of the tool is hidden from you. You're just touching this thing, but the service you get out of it is amazing. You're not talking about temperature of cans or coins or any of that stuff. You've got this interactive experience, and now everybody wants one of those things because it accomplishes so many things. And
Y-
it feels like if you have the opportunity to leverage these tools, like people want to leverage them, and you can bring that as a service to your customer base, you should at least consider adding this because you're either going to become the small gas station that is marginalized and probably put out, or you need to go one of these megas.
I, the gas station analogy. I know we're coming up on time. So Yuri
Yeah.
Soroka from my team. He's my dear friend. I've known like he's a guy who brought me into this thing 22 years. He loves doing the gas station analogy, right? And he actually I
Never heard
you
it
you
before.
you must have just completely like
Channeled it.
channeled
Yeah.
his energy because he says, you know, gas stations of old, right? Were that self-service. They pump the gas, they put the
Right.
oil in, right? And then in comes this energetic chipmunk, me,
Right.
and says, "What are you doing? You need to start selling Pepsi and
Right.
Snickers bars and lottery tickets because you're going to make way
Right.
more money on that than you are from gas." And some of those gas stations like, "Nah, you kidding me? I'm going to keep pumping gas, changing the oil and wiping on the windshield." And then some of those other gas stations are like, "I'm going to put in convenience. And as long as you," so Apollo is the Snickers bar. We
Right.
manage your convenience store. We do the payments, the processing. Keep pumping your gas. Nothing's going to change there, but we potentially are going to make you more money off that Snickers bar than you are off a gallon of gas. That's a brilliant analogy. And what I think the best comparison that I can bring to my company is Apollo is the convenience store.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, just in the last few minutes, what do you want to either we haven't touched on that you just want to take a second and touch on it, or just make sure? Obviously, we'll have in the comments below links to how people can get in touch with you or go to
Sure.
Apollo or learn more. But besides that, like, what do you just want to make sure we wrap the conversation up with?
Uh wow. A part of it is that I knew you were going to ask that question. I think just as ready as I was, I think through the flow of our chat, I feel like just as unprepared for this. Um,
I mean,
vision without execution is just hallucination.
right.
So as you listen to me, as you listen to the market and the industry, find your vision and execute on it,
Mhm.
because otherwise it's just a dream. And while it's important to dream, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Right? There's
Mhm.
there's my Dumbledore reference from Harry Potter. So my big point to everyone listening is that our industry has never experienced momentum such as this,
Mhm.
and this is your opportunity to learn more about this momentum, but also become a part of it. Execute on that vision.
I love that. One of the things that I would suggest to anyone listening to this that's really genuinely curious, and they should be, is because it's you and I having our kind of chat, we throw around technical terms because we know each other knows them. There's a number of probably layers underneath. We talk fast, we talk in depth, and so there's probably a lot. If you're
We
listening
we
to
put
this and
people in caves.
we put people in caves. My point is that so somebody might listen to this and say, "Well, I feel like I should learn more, but I have nowhere near the experience as these guys, and I don't want to seem silly asking the question." That's the exact wrong thing to take from this. Anybody who knows you, who's worked with you, in the wide variety of roles that roles that you've had and conversations that you've articulated, you make it very easy for people that they have a curiosity, they might have a bravery, they have an instinct that says, I need to either add a layer of service that perhaps there's an opportunity for, or I want to shore up services that might be getting ready to be removed or whatever. I want to know more. They don't need to be an expert. They just need to connect with you. And the conversation can go up the stack or down the stack, meaning get more technical or less technical, to paint out the broad brush idea and see if there's an interest or opportunity for more, whether it's with Apollo or whoever, but just to learn more about what's going on, why you're so passionate about it, and why they should consider, investigating it more.
Find me pretty much anywhere. This is pretentious. You can put my name into Google or even ChatGPT and ask them who I am. BillKleyman.com, Apollo, that's APOLO.us is our website where you can learn more about what we're doing in terms of basically creating AI powerhouses for data centers. I speak a lot. I'm a contributing editor to Data Center Knowledge, Data Center Frontier, Information Week. You can find me on a lot of these places, a lot of the many of the same conferences that David goes to, I go to as well. Just stop me and ask questions. And a part of what I've been doing a lot is education, obviously. But not, I don't need to sell. Just this technology is extraordinary, and my goal is to democratize it and give it as much access as we can to as many people as we can. I promise I'm not hard to find, and I'm not shy. I'd be happy to talk to you about these topics and push your perspective of what's happening in our industry, both from a technology and a human level. We'll push it forward.
Or just find him at the annual South Park Alumni Association get together. Bill, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
It's my absolute pleasure. You're gonna see me walk around with my Stan costume.
I love it. Hey, if you liked the conversation, give us a thumbs up. And if you loved it, subscribe. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.